Hello, good people. Welcome to our show. Hello, bad people. Welcome to our show. Hello, anyone who wanna learn more about UX, user experience design. Welcome. Today we are going to discuss how you can create your design that will win customers and even Google. Because today we are going to discuss this topic with Danny Farra. How are you?
Hey, Anatoly, I'm good. How are you?
Doing great. Looking forward to learn more, especially from someone who works in Google. So yeah, for me it's a big pleasure because I usually learn from different experts, great experts in different niches, but most of them are trying to satisfy users and Google too. So then before we start, just tell more about yourself, experience, background, and anything that can help our listeners to learn more about you.
Sure. So I've been at Google for a long time, almost 12 years now. Um, I'm concerned how much of my identity it is to be an employee at Google. But joking aside, I started in the advertising space, uh, working as a technical account manager, and eventually moved into a UX design role. And I was still in the advertising space when I started, and eventually I started to get more interested in accessibility. And I decided that I wanted to make accessibility and let's say accessible design what I want to focus on 100% of my time. Right, this is my passion. This is what I want to do, and I could do that at Google. So eventually I started kind of like focusing on accessibility within the advertising space, just becoming a subject matter expert. I saw an opportunity there. And then slowly kind of made my way into various roles that basically went towards 100% of my time being focused on accessibility. So I worked with the cloud inclusive design team for a little while, and then eventually I joined what's called sort of Google's central accessibility organization. We're a part of a larger organization called Products for All, and here I focus on a number of different things, but my primary focus is being the UX design lead for an app called Lookout, which is focused on blind or low vision users and enabling users to use their phone camera to discover the world around them. That's kind of
Nice.
the briefest that I can put it. But I also work on a number of other work streams related to accessibility within other products around Google. But yeah, that's my primary one, and that's sort of how I got here.
Nice, awesome, love it, love it. Yeah, great experience. Can you tell more about this word accessibility? What it means? I mean, because my audience can understand differently what it means. What kind of people you wanna help more, and how you can unite accessibility with simplicity, because users, customers hate to consume hard content. So they bounce fast according to Google, YouTube, different resources. And yeah, explain more about accessibility, who is the target audience, and simplicity, how to unite them.
Sure. Yeah, I love how you frame that question. I think simplicity is a pretty good aspect to consider for accessibility. I think that, if you think about, for example, reading, right? Not everybody reads the same. Not everybody loves to dive into, large books, and a lot of people consume information differently. And I think that's what accessibility is all about, is sort of offering people different ways to access information. And sticking with the reading topic, I mean, and simplicity, as you framed it, like if you think about, and I guess you had mentioned, marketing and getting, users to not bounds and things of that nature. I'm certainly not an expert in that space, and that's not exactly the space that I work in. But I do think that there's something to be said about when you have a simple and clear message. It is more accessible. It's something that can be translated to different folks. It's something that can be understood by folks with varying levels of education and varying, languages. And I think that when we talk about accessibility, it sounds super trivial and obvious, but it is about access, right? How do you access that information? And so what else can I say? I mean, the other thing I could say is, accessibility, it's not just, I think that there is sort of, it is intended to sort of be a way to approach, say how you design your product or your service to ensure that folks who have disabilities can use those products and services, can access them in the same way as anybody. But I think what people miss is that everybody at some point has some sort of disability, whether it's whether it's temporary, whether it's you could consider like a situational disability where it's like you're holding your baby, or like a temporary one where like you have a broken arm, or something that's more permanent. Those are all examples of disabilities. And so when we build for accessibility, when we design for accessibility, it does ultimately serve everybody, right, to some extent. And a lot of great innovations come from sort of an accessibility space or frame of mind. So hopefully that helps answer the question.
Yeah, love it. Awesome, great. Danny, can you tell about A/B testing? How you measure results? For example, if you create new design, and tell about A/B testing, because I know Google is very good with that. I mean, like to provide for limited audience to analyze, to change something. So tell your methods. For example, if you create new design, how you analyze the success of this design?
Yeah, good question. And we're fortunate to have researchers who are more experts in sort of like the testing space. But that we work closely because the designs are going to come from me. And there's certainly not always A/B. Do you like this one or that one? I think we always try to incorporate the insights of our users, right? And it's not always just an opinion. It's also like, well, what's some original thought that our users have as well, and how can we incorporate those as well? And so I think coming to users without just this is sometimes the A/B testing is the ideal way, but I think coming to users with sort of a more open mind about what it is that would be ideal is the best way to approach it. And I don't have too much else to say about that. I think A/B testing is one methodology, one way of sort of understanding which way is best. But I think ultimately it's more about asking users or whoever you're trying to reach more openly, what do you want, and sort of going from there. What do you expect?
Yeah, interesting. Let's talk about 25% of users, according to some data. 25% of users have poor eyesight, so blind vision. Can you tell how to help them? I mean, like if people can't consume content that most people can, and most websites, I don't know the data, but probably 99% of all websites ignore these users with poor eyesight. So your tips how to help these people?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think there's a lot of ways, and I work in the digital accessibility space, but there's a lot of just assistive technology and just like best tips that you can understand to making sure that everybody can visually read the content, but there's a lot more, detail we can go into that. But I would say just like to keep it really high level and simple. I'll use myself as an example, right? Like I'm colorblind, right? And so contrast really matters to me. So I would say, when you're looking at a website, make sure, or like your content, make sure that it meets a certain level of contrast. There's guidelines online that you can search, and there's probably slightly different, approaches to contrast, but generally it's pretty obvious when contrast is bad, and there's ways that you can test it to say, hey, my font is this pure white and the background is this color. Is this enough contrast for folks to see? Not only that, but what font size are you using? Are you kind of reducing the font size to make sure that you're getting enough information onto the screen at once? Well, make sure you don't reduce it to be too small. Again, it sounds obvious, but if you're looking at your font size and it's like, you're notching it down to like 12 and 10, I would say go, start at 16 or something like that and go from there. That's just sort of my opinion. And that way you're starting at a good baseline of sort of like a readable font, and consider all the various aspects of it, right? Like I think people like to, I would say people like to kind of be designers and be creative and have creative expression. And so, sometimes that leads to accessibility issues, right? So for example, you have a typeface that's not ideal, or it's just kind of like weird to look at, or, you have a background that's distracting, or you've set up your site in a way that, there's something that kind of automatically plays and there's all these animations and things happening, and they're sort of distracting, which can be challenging for some folks, right? Like, so I think all of that considered, those are sort of the low-hanging fruits. I would also say if you want to think a little bit more advanced, vision is a spectrum, and there are folks with who need eyeglasses, but there's also folks who are completely blind, and sort of everything in between, right? Being having low vision, and there's all sorts of different scenarios to consider. And so there's various assistive technologies you can use, magnification, and so on and so forth. So I think that just considering that, right? Like if I'm, say, completely blind, how do I access this information? Okay, well, maybe you should familiarize yourself with what is a screen reader, right? This is a very common assistive technology that's used across, it's available across a number of different browsers and operating systems. And so familiarizing yourself with how somebody who cannot see accesses the content on their computer or their phone, often it is a screen reader. And so what is, how do you set up your site so that somebody who uses this device can actually read things and navigate them in a way that makes sense? So it's not just about what can you visually see and how can you tweak it visually. It's also about the structure of your website, right? So do you have, let's say if your website's very simple and it just sort of has like some content on the screen, do you have like a heading structure, an H1 title? Coming from the SEO space, I would imagine like you all might think about things like this. How, if you are somebody who only uses a keyboard, right? How do you navigate the screen, right? If you start hitting your tab key, like, does it sort of go in sort of a way that makes sense, or does it kind of jump all over the screen? Can somebody who only uses a keyboard access every button? How does a screen reader read out the name of a button or a control on the screen? Have you ensured that all of your buttons sort of like make sense? Like if you can, if you have sort of an icon as well as some text to communicate a button instead of something that's more esoteric and is only understood by it maybe got a little bit too cute in terms of like which icon you're choosing. Like I think these are all considerations when it comes to providing access to your content.
Yeah, valuable. Love it. Love it. So awesome. Danny, I wanna ask about this question consists of two questions. The first question, why you decided to work on Google, and the second question, why Google decided to hire you. The main reason why I'm asking about that, because I have audience who have the dream to work on big companies like Google. So can you share tips what they need to do and why? Your story, why you decided to come to Google, and Google why decided to hire you.
Sure. I'm not sure I can fully know the answer to that, right? There's so much that goes on in the background, and not to mention, like I said, it was 12 years ago. So I wonder how much the hiring practices have changed. What can I say about it? Because certainly I started to get these types of questions when a lot more, I mean, over the course of my time here. But what can I say? I think, Google hires really smart people. Yeah. And I think that if you can demonstrate, and this is obviously like totally unofficial advice, but I do think that a good way to sort of stand out in your, as a professional is to demonstrate passion, right? Like, I think that when folks are sort of like, I want to work at X company and I don't really care what I do, I think that's sort of a little bit of a turnoff just personally. I think that sort of demonstrates like, okay, well, it's like maybe you want to sort of get your foot in the door, but I think to demonstrate that there's something you really want to do, something you really like. I think that's what has kept me, at Google for so long, is just like I was able to continue to sort of pursue various passions. First, I was, I came in, I was sort of more on the sales side. And then I was able to, it took me a long time, but I was able to demonstrate that I could be a UX designer at Google's level. And that took a lot of sort of honestly just sort of like rejection in various ways. And when you're passionate about something, you take that rejection and you sort of just continue to push forward, and you just continue to knock on the door. And then sort of just for me personally, it's always been about continuing to identify your niche within a space. So first I was like, okay, I like tech. And then I was like, okay, I like design. And then within design, I really like accessibility. And now I'm trying to think about, okay, within accessibility, what is it that I really value? What is it that I really, really want to focus on? Right now, it's assistive technology. It's product design within the accessibility space. And so I think that I continue to kind of get more niche, and I think that's okay, right? Because it demonstrates that you can be an expert, and it gives you almost like it's like a personal creative expression in a way, right? To say, I love this thing, I'm going to pursue it. And the more specific that you can get, the more I think you can become an expert, because the space gets more and more focused. And I think people notice that, right? Like, it doesn't matter if you're talking about a recruiter or a hiring manager or just like somebody on LinkedIn or whatever. I think people notice when they're like, oh, this person is an extremely talented illustrator of, glassware, like, I don't know, something like that. And I think if you look at social media, you see people, you just go, oh, this whole account, which is extremely popular, just does one tiny joke, right? It's just like one joke. And I saw this one where this guy kind of just like has his like selfie mode camera, and he kind of just walks up to various people and puts his arm around them and captures their reaction to that. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but it's like, that's the whole account, right? And there's something about that specificity that it doesn't get old, and I think that they've captured something there. So yeah, hopefully that's a good answer.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, without passion, it doesn't matter. You wanna work on Google, at any other place, to have your own business, you need to have passion. And I remember I started one project because of chasing money. I felt that I can fill the gap in the market, and we hired a big team, a lot of people, and after 3 years, I quit. I left this project because I hated Monday. I loved Friday, and I got it. I can't go ahead like this, and without passion, I don't recommend to anyone. Just leave it. 70% of people hate their jobs. It's a lot. 70% of people. Wow. Yeah, and uh, we have one life, and it's better to enjoy the process. As Mark Twain said, if you find your life and job, you don't need to work even one day in your life. So
Yeah.
I agree with you,
Yeah,
Danny.
couldn't agree more.
Yeah, nice. Danny, I want to ask about creativity. It's very important in design to stand out from the rest. I mean, like, to create something special. And we need to be simple because users live hard looking content. So can you tell about how to stand out from the rest? I mean, like, how to create something new, special, when we have 2 billion websites online, 2 billion websites, but we need to stand out from the rest and create something new. Any tips about that, about creativity?
Oh, you're saying 2 billion websites. Oh,
Yeah.
gotcha. Okay. How do you stand out?
So much content online, at any niche, at any field, but we need to find the way how to.
It's funny. I started to like post these YouTube shorts
Mhm,
of just, I like to cook,
mhm,
and I think that the more that it kind of goes back to the passion thing, like I think the more that I do what I want to do, the more that I feel like I'm doing something that's like original or creative.
mhm,
And the thing that I try to do is, the second that I'm not having fun, I don't do that thing. So for example,
mhm,
when doing like a cooking video, if I'm like spending too much time on the setup, or like just or editing, or the way that and I'm not really having fun anymore, it's kind of starting to annoy me to like use the tool, or I feel like there's some sort of barrier. I'm like, oh, I need to get some sort of video editing software. Like, what do I, if I can shed those sorts of hesitations, then I think that the product ends up being a lot better, and not necessarily more viewers or whatever, but just like better for me in my discovery of what it is that I'm trying to accomplish.
mhm,
And I think that it does end up being more creative, because that's what it's all about, like being creative, and it is about sort of being original.
mhm,
And I think the more that we eliminate our hesitations, eliminate our concerns about what other people are going to think, and I think, there's a lot of folks who are just tweaking and optimizing, like this, where that, and I think that there is a science and an art to that, but I also feel like there's not enough of sort of people just saying what's on their mind, or what they personally feel they want folks to know. and they're letting sort of like the engines and the algorithms like drive so much, like, oh, what does the report say? Okay, we need to use this word or whatever. So yeah, I think I think that's some thoughts on creativity and pursuing creativity. Yeah.
Yeah, got it. Danny, I wanna ask about intuition. You know, it's interesting. You have 12 years of experience. And what I found, experts who have extended experience usually, often, not usually, they can use intuition more than getting data, analyze from data. And I remember one story from about Jeff Bezos. Once he got a research team, and this team asked him to give more time to analyze about new product. He denied. He told, guys, nobody knows. We need to test, to analyze. And this product was Alexa. Today, almost all homes in the US have this product. So Jeff Bezos has intuition, and he got enough data. Can you tell about your intuition? You know a lot about accessibility, about UX, and how you use your intuition. Probably it's like your experience to craft new ideas, to change something. So any tips about that?
Yeah, great question. And it comes with time and with confidence and with experience and all of those things. You feel more comfortable pursuing your intuition and finding ways to build consensus around your intuition. I think that's kind of how the story that you mentioned went. I think you shouldn't silence your intuition, right? I think it doesn't mean that you're setting up your website or your product or your service and you just kind of go, I think this is right, and I'm going to it's balanced, right? So I think on one hand you can kind of go, this is a creative outlet for me and I just need to let it flow and I'm going to like implement it and so on. So I think that's great intuition. But I guess if you're trying to achieve a certain business goal, I think that intuition is also important, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be testing or monitoring certain variables, right? And reading them and considering them, right? It's not about I'm going to look at these variables and this data and just say I'm doing what this tells me no matter what. It's combining your intuition with the data to see if you're right or wrong, because I think that a lot of times folks do get caught up in making sure that the numbers are completely there. And I think that the business always pressures us to make sure that numbers, consensus, and everything is just driving. Everybody wants a guarantee that something's going to work, right? Mm-hmm. And that doesn't really exist.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very delicate balance, and it's very hard to get that right. And I think it's one of those things that's just never perfect. But if you can, as you're sort of climbing your career, continue to identify, what parts of your intuition speak very strongly to you, and make sure that you don't just dismiss it, right? Like if it just requires you getting a piece of paper and drawing some things or writing some things down and then showing it to somebody, maybe it's one person, maybe it's to a room of people. I think that will serve you in more so than just sort of hesitating or waiting for something to someone else to kind of tell you, what to do. So I would say, in short, play in your sandbox, right? Your intuition is your sandbox. So just make sure that you're not silencing any of those thoughts, because ultimately intuition, it does come from data. Like it comes from your experience. It comes from your perspective that you've gained over time in life. And so that's not nothing, right? That is data. That is as good, if not better than research. And it's important to pursue that.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, valuable. Love it. Uh, Danny, I want to ask about mistakes. In my life, I made a lot of mistakes. I keep doing them. Sometimes I don't know how to find another way, especially, for example, if I start something new, I need to do mistakes before getting any results. For example, when I started PR, I wrote a bunch of press releases. I pitched all of them and got zero mentions, zero results, everything zero. But I learned how it works. Then I hired team of specialists who can write great releases. I hired specialists who can pitch them. And when I had the process, we got mentions on CNN, Business Insider, many great resources because of learning from my mistakes. Can you list mistakes that you can see UX designers still do but can avoid? Because we have two mistakes. The first mistake, you need to learn through experience. The second, you can learn before doing them. So if you have any mistakes that UX designers can avoid before doing, let us know.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm sure I still make lots of mistakes. I mean, going back to the accessibility discussion, I think that, accessibility, it's accessible design. It's been around for a while, and I think it is, becoming more of a conversation point. But I do think that, conducting your design and waiting till the last minute to consider accessibility is a common mistake, right? So I think one way you could avoid that is to consider, like, who are you recruiting for your research? Who are your demographics that you're looking at? And whenever you're exploring a new idea, you're brainstorming, make sure that you consider folks who are not yourself and don't have the same abilities as yourself and don't live in the same country as you and don't have the same, don't have the same phone as you, don't have, the same operating system. All of those things, I think, can contribute to less mistakes, less of sort of like, okay, we, are at the launch point and, oh, somebody asked us about accessibility or internationalization or some other, aspect of creating good design. And I mean, other examples could maybe include just like, I mean, honestly, our conversation up until this point is helpful in answering the question, right? Like making sure that you pursue your intuition, right? I think a lot of folks don't do that enough and instead are trying to maybe deliver something that they know that their stakeholders want instead of what it is that they think is right. They're just trying to do a good job, make sure everybody, likes them and that they haven't upset or delivered something that is not what's expected, and maybe it's going to push the timeline out too much and so on and so forth. And I think UX designers can feel comfortable with the discomfort, right? Like of sort of just saying, I know this is what I said originally, or maybe what we agreed to, or this is what the original sort of brief of what this project is about said, but I really think this is what we should do, right? And I think that that's advice that I can give through my time as a designer and my time at Google, is just to say, it's okay to rock the boat, and then it's okay to get rejected, right? Like that happens too. So I think those are a couple of ways.
Yeah, I agree. I think only rejection can tell what you need to fix, and Joan Rowling was rejected plus 20 times before Harry Potter appeared in this world. And today, I don't know how many people love this book. Probably one of the best books ever. My wife loves so much this book and read many times. So I think rejection, it's okay, and I was rejected many times, but just need to think, if someone rejected you, that means you have something to fix, to improve, to go ahead. Yeah,
Yes.
Danny, I wanna ask about your experience. What I found, I usually get high results with clients, customers who understand what I do. For example, if I wanna achieve high ranking positions on Google, um, then for me it's better to cooperate with clients who understand why we need to create high quality content, why it's important to think more about customers than getting more traffic, many different things. um, I want to ask you, if you started today from scratch, forget about your 12 years of experience, it's your first day in UX design and you need to learn the basic, what will you do today if you need to learn from scratch?
I think the first thing I would do is educate myself. And it's okay if you are not somebody who wants to go out and buy a book about UX design or take a class. Classes are expensive, school is expensive. I think that understanding your level of comfort with how much education you want is okay. So for example, if you want to read a series of books about UX design, and that will definitely serve you. But if you're more comfortable doing a couple of searches about UX design and then just sort of diving in and trying to do it yourself, like on day one, I think that's okay too. So I think just making sure that you are going back to our discussion on intuition, if you're sort of listening to your intuition to say, this is something that I want to do, and let me just do it in the way that's most comfortable for me, I think that that's going to see the most success, as opposed to saying, well, UX requires this degree, or I need to have this level of experience to get any sort of job in UX, and you're sort of dwelling on that mountain that you have to climb. But the reality is you'll have sort of small wins along the way. And so I think, educating yourself is definitely the first thing that you can do. And then just sort of diving right in. There's tools out there. There's Figma. There's, even I've designed in Google Slides before, like anything that makes shapes, maybe it's just pen and paper if you're comfortable with that. I think those can help you sort of begin to understand more about UX design. I remember one of my first tasks as I was being mentored to become a UX designer was to take some fancy visual design graphic that you find online, right? And just try to recreate it in a design tool. And that will familiarize yourself with, well, how'd they get the shadow on this? Where do I find that in my toolkit here? How do they change color? How do they match the color of this screenshot? How do they match font? How do they create arcs? How do they, just sort of using the UX or the UI design that's out there and trying to recreate it in a design tool could be a really good exercise for getting to know the design tool. So between educating yourself and getting to know the tools in that way, I think that's a good start.
Yeah, nice. Love it. Awesome. And can you tell your balance between educating yourself and doing something? Because I see when some students can learn and do nothing, but according to some data, people forget fast. 50% of new skills people forget in the first hour. The next 50% for a few days. But that is why Bill Gates, many great entrepreneurs, they usually make notes and think how they can adapt and do something. So can you tell your balance, this line between educating yourself and doing?
I think they can be the same. Like, I think doing something is educational. So going back to what I said, I don't think that if the word education, makes you hesitate, then you go start doing, right? I think that people learn, this is kind of goes back to a principle of accessibility, is people learn through various ways. And so I personally, I think it's important to balance it. For me, I think I always like to read up on what I can to understand a space. If there's studies that have been done for an upcoming feature that I'm going to work on, or if there's just sort of an area that I know that, like accessibility, right? Like accessibility, there's all this great content online that you can just search and you can find like really good sort of information and guidelines, stuff that's tried and true, and you can read a book and so on. But I think that that's not necessarily better than trying things first too, right? If you have that freedom, I think inevitably you have to go back and learn things about what is the next challenge that I'm encountering while I'm doing something, while I'm approaching UX design, while I'm approaching accessibility within my website. You inevitably encounter a point where you kind of go, oh, I'm not really sure what is a good font to use. What is it? What are headings? Like, how do I implement these things? So even as you start doing, it's more of like a cyclical thing, right? It's not necessarily like, am I doing this or that? It's kind of just this never-ending cycle of educating and then doing what it is that you learn through your education.
Yeah, awesome. Love it. And Danny, I have my final question about the future. I want to ask you, take your crystal ball and let us know what kind of future will be in accessibility, UX design, because many things are coming fast. We have AI today. Apple is going to launch augmented reality. I don't know how it looks, but people still have habits to use old content. Businesses need to adapt to new environment. So let us know what kind of future will be in your vision and how we can adapt today to this possible future.
Future with regards to accessibility and design. That's a great question. I think, that I look to a lot of the products that have been created and popularized today, and how easy it is to access that information. And I think that they do have a strong accessibility component. So if I use, for example, like I think you had said Alexa earlier, or these types of like home devices, I think just having that level of access for technology is something that's going to continue, right? That's going to continue to grow, where we're not, limited to the devices that we're aware of today, or the solutions that we have today. And yeah, there is like this whole push now around generative AI. I'm certainly not a big expert in that space, but I think with regards to accessibility and sort of design in the future, it's all about the sort of little things that we encounter on a day-to-day basis with regards to our limbs and our senses, and various struggles that we have with regards to technology, and just making those things a lot easier. That's kind of how I think about things. I'm not too, I think there's always something new in tech, right? There's always the hot thing of the moment. And if I can just focus on accessibility and assistive technology and improving the design of those things, and not losing sight, by the way, of the fact that there's this whole world outside of the digital space. And I think maybe we'll get back to that. Maybe, people will go, hey, we haven't thought about chairs in a while. Like maybe we need to reinvent those a little bit. Maybe we need to, I think like that industrial design space, I don't want that to get lost in our future and the future of accessible design. So, I think all of those things matter in terms of the future. It's not exclusively about AI. And one other thing I'll say is just that I'm personally continuing to learn about all the things that we have created to this point. And I think that the future is a lot of just picking up what's already been there, right? For me personally, I started using like dictation to create, emails and things of that nature. Like this is not new technology, but I just personally haven't been exposed to it as much. And when I started to just go, my wrist started to hurt, right? And I was like, well, of course, I've been at Google for 12 years typing away every word that I want to communicate. But if I can just pick up this old or this technology that's been around to just say what I'm speaking, it's actually like a lot of them work pretty well, and I can generate really quickly emails, texts, chats, anything, especially if my wrist is hurting that day. And so that's my hope, is that we sort of look around at what's already been created and make sure that its value is realized.
Awesome. Yeah, I think future will be great because we have people like Danny who can change the future and keep learning, because we are students on this life, and never stop learning. Whatever happens, just think how you can go ahead, adapt, develop, innovate what you have. Danny, it's a big pleasure to get in my show, to learn from you. I love this experience. It's awesome episode. Tell our audience the best way how to keep learning from you, how to reach out to you, how to follow you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, they can follow me on LinkedIn, or they can reach out to me on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in my cooking videos, you can follow me on YouTube as well.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I'll submit. I'll add all cooking videos in the description below. So someone who loves cooking, probably my wife will. I know her. she loves to do it. Okay, guys, you can find a LinkedIn account, a YouTube video in the description below. Listen us on Apple, Google, Spotify. Thanks again for your time. Love it. So valuable. I recommend to anyone to follow Danny on LinkedIn and subscribe to his videos on YouTube. Okay, guys, love you. See you.
Thanks, Anatoly.